Squirrel speaking. What's for you, Bullwinkle? Somebody else wants a weather forecast.
Oh, Baz stays. Just when I was catching up on my reading.
The Bobbsey twins at the seashore.
Yeah, you can't beat the classics, I only say.
No animated duos came close to the magnificence that Rocky and Bullwinkle brought to screens. When the show debuted in 1959, it didn't just entertain, it exploded.
Here is the latest batch of documents to be classified, Chief. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
All about submarine.
The telephone directory?
My number's in there.
The adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle and friends stood out for many things, but the most important was its sharp satire. The show thrived on clever wordplay and sharp parody. Kids laughed at the slapstick. Adults caught the satire. It was layered, smart, and a little daring. And this extreme cost them an episode. Join us to explore the exact reasons why this Rocky and Bullwinkle episode was banned. The captivating magic of Rocky and Bullwinkle. The Rocky and Bullwinkle show had a strange magic, some sort of mastery over the craft, in ways that let them pivot from absurd wordplay to razor-sharp satire in seconds. The jokes came fast, puns, reversals, misdirection, sometimes brilliant, sometimes groan-worthy, always bold. It was that kind of humor, playful, slightly absurd, and unexpectedly clever, that made the series a phenomenon, and occasionally a problem. That was the rhythm of it. Fast, silly, slightly off-center, that was the joke. It kept looping back on itself until the absurdity became the punchline. Half nonsense, half wordplay, fully committed. The humor didn't just wink at you, it elbowed you in the ribs. Groan, pause, laugh anyway. And just like that, chaos turned into culture. That was the magic of the adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle and friends. When it first aired on the American Broadcasting Company in 1959, it quickly carved out its own lane. Yes, it had slapstick. Yes, it had troubles and moose-sized misunderstandings. But underneath that, sharp satire, political jabs, cultural references that sailed straight over kids' heads and landed perfectly with the adults sitting beside them. Unlike many cartoons of that era, it didn't just aim for giggles. It poked at Cold War paranoia. It mocked advertising gimmicks. It teased pop culture. In doing so, it carved its own niche away from masterpieces like Looney Tunes and the productions of Hanna-Barbera. At the center of it all were two unlikely heroes: Rocky, the brave, level-headed flying squirrel. Bullwinkle, the lovable moose, was always a step behind, but never short on confidence. They lived in Frostbite Falls, Minnesota, and their adventures didn't just reset each week. They unfolded in serialized arcs, episode after episode, pulling viewers into cliffhangers and clever twists. It was silly, it was smart, and somehow it made room for both at the same time. Around Rocky and Bullwinkle was a rotating lineup of mini-shows, little features tucked inside the main program. There was Fractured Fairy Tales, there was Peabody's Improbable History, and then there was Dudley Do-Right of the Mounties. Dudley quickly became one of the most memorable supporting characters. He was a parody of silent film melodramas, of over-the-top heroism, of Canadian stereotypes. Dudley was earnest, brave, and completely sincere, but not exactly sharp. His attempts to defend justice usually spiraled into chaos. He didn't do it on purpose. That was the charm. At his side was his loyal horse, literally named Horse, his commanding officer, Inspector Fenwick, the ever-endangered Nell Fenwick, who constantly needed rescuing, and, of course, the villain, Snidely Whiplash, complete with the exaggerated mustache and dramatic flair. Everything about Dudley's world was exaggerated. Damsels tied up, villains cackling, heroic rescues performed with absolute seriousness, even when they made no sense. It was all satire, big, loud, obvious satire. So when the episode that got them canceled aired, it probably felt like just another harmless spoof in a long string of cultural parodies. But this time, They aimed at something different. What episode was that? How troubling was it? Keep watching to find out. The episode that tore the internet. The episode was titled Stokey the Bear. The episode wasn't just another parody. It was aimed at Smokey Bear. And what the creators didn't fully grasp was just how protected Smokey was. To understand why Stokey the Bear sparked backlash, you have to understand what Smokey Bear meant in the 1960s. Smokey wasn't just a cartoon mascot. He carried weight. He was introduced in 1944 during World War II. At the time, wildfires were seen as more than environmental disasters. They threatened the country's timber supply, which supported the war effort. Preventing fires became part of the national responsibility. Smokey's campaign was inspired by a real bear cub rescued from a wildfire in New Mexico. Over time, he grew into something much bigger than that origin story. His slogan, "Only you can prevent forest fires," became one of the most recognizable lines in advertising history. It wasn't just catchy, it was personal. It put responsibility directly on the individual, and his image was carefully managed by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council. Every appearance, every use, controlled, protected. Smokey wasn't just a character. He was a symbol of public responsibility, a government-backed message wrapped in a friendly face. So when the Rocky and Bullwinkle show turned that symbol into parody, even playfully, it didn't land as simple comedy. It landed as a problem. Unlike most cartoon characters created simply to entertain, Smokey wasn't just fiction with a funny hat. He was federal property, carefully protected, purpose-built. Smokey's personality, the calm, always friendly bear, was crafted with intention. He wasn't there to make you laugh. He was there to make you think, to make you feel responsible, especially if you were a child. By the 1950s and early 60s, Smokey was everywhere, on posters, on the radio, on television, in school materials handed out across the country. The campaign worked. Wildfire numbers dropped significantly after Smokey's introduction. Annual incidents were reduced by tens of thousands. That wasn't branding fluff. That was measurable impact. Smokey wasn't just a mascot. He became a symbol of civic duty. So by the time the Rocky and Bullwinkle show decided to parody him, Smokey wasn't treated like just another cartoon character. He was treated with something close to reverence, almost like a national emblem. And that's what made Stokey the Bear different. So why was the episode banned? And how bad was this ban? Let's see. Why the episode was banned. The parody didn't just tease a pop culture trend, it targeted an icon the government considered vital to public safety. And in an era when television was quickly becoming the most powerful voice inside American homes, officials worried about something very real. What if the joke weakened the message? What if the satire made people take fire prevention less seriously? What if years of public service work unraveled because of one cartoon? That fear is what turned comedy into controversy. In the episode, Stokey wasn't the responsible forest guardian that people knew. He had fallen under the hypnotic spell of the ever-scheming Snidely Whiplash. It was Stokey who, for years, helped prevent forest fires, but he's not the same now. Under hypnosis, he's ordered to start fires instead of stopping them. Why are you doing this, Mr. Whiplash? How else can you barbecue hot dogs? Look into my eyes, now go light a fire somewhere. It was ridiculous, over the top, classic Dudley absurdity. But the premise itself, turning a fire prevention hero into a fire-starting villain, hit a nerve. Meanwhile, the episode stacked on its usual chaos. At the Mountie Post Hospital, thermometers were sterilized in boiling water. What's Nell's temperature? 182. A little high, isn't it? The humor was outrageous and intentionally nonsensical. That was the style. But when layered onto a parody of Smokey Bear, a figure tied directly to public safety, The jokes felt less harmless to those in charge. What had always been playful satire suddenly looked like sabotage. And that's where the line was drawn. That was the tone. Serious stakes delivered with a wink. And just like that, the chaos rolled on. The Stokey the Bear segment appeared in Season 1, Episode 16 of the Rocky and Bullwinkle show. It introduced viewers to Stokey, a clear parody of Smokey Bear, but unlike the real Smokey, who prevented forest fires, Stokey did the opposite. He started them. The episode opens with lumberjacks in the town of Mountup staring in disbelief as their forest goes up in flames. Soon the truth comes out. Stokey has been hypnotized by Snidely Whiplash and is now gleefully torching everything in sight. Dudley Do-Right sets off in pursuit, determined, as always, to restore justice. At one point, Dudley spots a massive bear disguised as a firefighter and identifies him with total confidence. That's it. That's the clue. The absurdity doesn't slow down. The firehouse itself burns to the ground, while Stokey calmly roasts marshmallows in the middle of the chaos. Trying to solve the problem, Dudley decides the bear simply needs a change of scenery. So he escorts Stokey to Chicago. Naturally, another fire breaks out. This time, it's an unmistakable nod to the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. And in the punchline, Dudley persuades Mrs. O'Leary to blame the blaze on her cow, echoing the old legend tied to that disaster. How did the authorities react to this bizarre storytelling? What happened next? Keep watching to find out. The chaos that erupted after. On paper, it was classic J. Ward humor, irreverent, satirical, and gleefully absurd. The kind of comedy that twisted history and logic just enough to make you laugh at the ridiculousness of it all. But the U.S. Forest Service didn't find it amusing. To them, the episode did more than joke around. It undermined Smokey Bear's authority. It trivialized the very real dangers of wildfire. And by tying a Smokey-like character to one of the most devastating urban fires in American history, it crossed into territory they considered disrespectful. The idea that a parody bear could be blamed, even jokingly, for the Chicago fire felt especially offensive to officials who had spent decades carefully building Smokey's credibility. What the writers saw as satire, the government saw as damage control waiting to happen. And that difference in perspective turned one cartoon episode into a serious problem. In response, the U.S. Forest Service didn't just complain quietly. They filed formal objections. They escalated it. They even sent uniformed officers to J. Ward Productions to make their outrage unmistakably clear. The message was simple. This wasn't funny. The episode was pulled from syndication almost immediately. It never appeared on official VHS releases. It was left off the DVD collections. For decades, it was essentially erased from circulation, as if it had never aired at all. To be fair, banning an episode in the 1960s wasn't unusual. Television at the time operated under tight scrutiny. Networks answered to sponsors. Sponsors responded to public opinion. And everyone kept an eye on what might trigger government attention. This wasn't the era of streaming platforms where controversial episodes can resurface uncut years later. In the early 60s, if something drew too much heat, it could disappear indefinitely. J. Ward, the show's creator, had a reputation for turning in episodes at the last possible minute. That strategy left networks little time to demand edits. It also allowed him to slip in sharp satire and political jabs that might otherwise have been softened or cut entirely. And Rocky and Bullwinkle weren't alone in brushing up against controversy. Looney Tunes later faced criticism for violence and ethnic stereotypes, leading to edits and bans of certain shorts. Even Disney's programming, often seen as wholesome, contained moments of humor that would be reconsidered decades later. But Stokey the Bear was different. It didn't just poke at culture, it poked at a government-backed public safety campaign. That shifted the conversation from taste to responsibility. Officials didn't frame it as offensive. They framed it as potentially harmful. To them, this wasn't about comedy standards. It was about public safety. What followed this ban? Was this ban what eventually led to the end of the show? Keep watching to find out. The ban might have been unnecessary. Over time, fans began to notice something was missing. The episode developed a kind of underground legend. Like many banned or lost pieces of media, it became more intriguing precisely because it was hard to find. Bootleg copies circulated quietly. Then, years later, as the internet made archiving easier and censorship harder, the episode resurfaced on platforms like YouTube and the Internet Archive. For the first time in decades, viewers could judge it for themselves. And now the question lingers, did the U.S. Forest Service overreact? Or was the ban justified, given Smokey Bear's real-world role in fire prevention? That debate, much like the episode itself, refuses to fade quietly. Some later syndicated episodes of The Bullwinkle Show included short segments called The World of Commander McBragg, featuring a boastful storyteller recounting wildly exaggerated feats of heroism to a skeptical friend. These segments were never actually part of the Bullwinkle canon. They were created for Tennessee Tuxedo and his tales, and later appeared on The Underdog Show. Although the animation was done by the same company, Gamma Productions of Mexico, the shorts were produced for Total Television, not Word Productions. These segments were bundled with pre-1990 cut versions of The Bullwinkle Show and also appeared in syndicated episodes of The Underdog Show, Dudley Do Right and Friends, and Uncle Waldo's Cartoon Show. Since 1990, however, these features have been removed from the Bullwinkle library and have never appeared on Bullwinkle home video releases. There were several attempts to revive Rocky and Bullwinkle throughout the 1970s. One 1981 revival parodied the Super Bowl. A script was written, storyboards produced, and NBC gave it the green light, but the project was canceled after the NFL objected. The parody included actual team owners, mocked the Super Bowl as the Stupor Bowl, and showed Boris rigging the game. Another revival attempt happened at Disney in the mid-1980s, when the company was distributing the show on VHS, developed by Tad Stones and Michael Peraza Jr. It was titled The Secret Adventures of Bullwinkle and aimed to modernize the classic series. Returning characters like Mr. Peabody and Sherman and Dudley Do Right were included, along with new segments such as Fractured Scary Tales, a horror parody, and a Mr. Know-It-All skit where Bullwinkle programs a VCR. However, before the pitch could move forward, the creators discovered that Disney did not own the Rocky and Bullwinkle franchise, so the idea was abandoned. Jay Ward and his partner Alex Anderson created Rocky as part of the Frostbite Falls Review, a pilot that was never developed. The character later became the star of Rocky and His Friends. When the show switched networks from ABC to NBC, its name changed to The Bullwinkle Show, and Bullwinkle replaced Rocky as the lead because the moose had become more popular than Rocky. Rocky shared a home with Bullwinkle in the fictional town of Frostbite Falls, Minnesota, a playful parody of the real-life town of International Falls, Minnesota. Together, they went on a variety of adventures, usually foiling the schemes of the series' villains, Boris Badenov and Natasha Fatale, and occasionally their boss, Fearless Leader. Rocky's most famous catchphrase was, "Hokey smoke." His personality was that of a dependable, slightly naive, all-American youth, a plucky squirrel who was smarter than his moose partner. As the brains of the moose and squirrel duo, Rocky often came up with clever solutions to tricky situations. Still, he could be just as gullible as Bullwinkle when it came to Boris and Natasha's disguises. sometimes only commenting, "Those two look familiar," or "That voice? Where have I heard it before?" Rocky often relied on his ability to fly, which was always accompanied by a jet engine sound effect fitting for his full name. In the original opening of Rocky and His Friends, Rocky is introduced as that jet-age aerial ace, performing a solo air show for an amazed crowd. His flying abilities, however, were portrayed inconsistently. In some episodes, like the first season's jet fuel formula, Rocky's flight was limited to gliding, much like a real flying squirrel. In others, he displayed near superhero powers, hovering, ascending, and even carrying objects. For example, in the second season's Greenpert Oogle, Rocky flies all the way from Minnesota to Washington, D.C. under his own power. Occasionally, Rocky would get an extra boost from Bullwinkle's strength, using acrobatic maneuvers to increase his flight speed, as seen in the second season's Upsidaisium, when trying to reach the hovering Mount Flatten. According to the series, Rocky learned his aerial skills at the Cedar Your Pants Flying School, a playful nod to the phrase, "seat of your pants." Voice actress June Foray provided the voice of Rocky, as well as Natasha Fatale, Nell Fenwick, and other female characters. She continued voicing Rocky in modern adaptations, including the 2000 Rocky and Bullwinkle film, until her retirement in 2014. What about Bullwinkle? How much depth did his character bring to the show? Let's see. The Bullwinkle's character in the Rocky and Bullwinkle show. In 2014, Rocky and Bullwinkle appeared in a Geico commercial alongside the Geico Gecko, looking at the Rocky Mountains and trying to explain their name. Rocky even made a playful appearance during a late 1990s Atlanta Braves baseball game when a real squirrel ran onto the field. The broadcast humorously labeled him Rocket J Squirrel at shortstop. As for Bullwinkle, Bullwinkle J Moose is a fictional character and the other main protagonist of the 1959 to 1964 animated series Rocky and His Friends and the Bullwinkle Show, often collectively called Rocky and Bullwinkle. Created by Jay Ward and Bill Scott, the show moved from ABC to NBC in 1961, becoming The Bullwinkle Show, and remained there until 1964. It later returned to ABC in reruns for 9 more years and has been in syndication ever since. In 1996, Bullwinkle was ranked number 32 on TV Guide's list of the 50 greatest TV stars of all time. Bullwinkle J. Moose was well-intentioned but famously foolish, which provided endless jokes and plot devices throughout the show. Despite being the so-called moronic moose, he often helped the brains of the duo, Rocky the Flying Squirrel, during their adventures. While the two were on opposite ends of the IQ scale, they shared optimism, persistence, and a strong sense of ethics and morality. Although Bullwinkle wasn't as clever as Rocky, he occasionally broke the fourth wall, showing he wasn't as clueless as he appeared. His apparent lack of intelligence sometimes worked to his advantage. For example, he was immune to mind-numbing chemicals in Goof Gas Attack, and was the only one able to handle the Kerr Derby hat in Missouri Mishmash. Bullwinkle's voice was nasally, with a slight lisp that added to his charm. Bullwinkle also hosted other segments of the show, Mr. Know-It-All, where he attempted to demonstrate his supposed expertise on topics like disarming bombs, curing hiccups, or escaping from Devil's Island. Bullwinkle's Corner, where he would read poetry, including William Wordsworth's I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud, and other interstitial drop-ins throughout episodes. A recurring gag involved Bullwinkle trying to pull a rabbit from a top hat. Rocky would sarcastically respond, "Again?" or "But that trick never works," while Bullwinkle insisted, "Nothing up my sleeve presto," or "This time for sure presto." Inevitably, he would pull out something completely unexpected: lions, tigers, bears, rhinoceroses, and sometimes even Rocky himself. After each failed attempt, Rocky would transition to a commercial by saying, Now, here's something we hope you'll really like. Bill Scott, Jay Ward's partner and the head writer of the series, who was the original voice of Bullwinkle J. Moose. According to Scott, Ward simply assumed he would take on the role, and he did, bringing the character to life for years, even after the original series ended in 1964. One of Scott's later post-series projects was an animatronic stage show for Bullwinkle's family food and fun restaurant, often called Bullwinkle's Restaurant. The recorded soundtracks for that show became some of Scott's final performances as both Bullwinkle and Dudley Do-Right. He died of a heart attack in 1985. At the time of his death, he had just completed voicing another Moose character, Moosel, for the first season of The Wuzzles. After Scott's passing, Bullwinkle was voiced by Australian actor Keith Scott, no relation, throughout the 1980s and 1990s. Keith's most widely recognized performance came in the 2000 Universal Pictures film The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle. Scott Wilson, best known for his work as the voice of Chuck E. Cheese, portrayed Bullwinkle in the 1980 live touring production Bullwinkle's Call of the Wild show. He later reprised the role in animated skits produced for Bullwinkle's restaurants around 1996. In more recent years, Tom Kenny voiced Bullwinkle for a short film titled Rocky and Bullwinkle, originally planned to premiere alongside Mr. Peabody and Sherman. The short was ultimately canceled and replaced with Almost Home, a DreamWorks short tied to the film Home. However, the Rocky and Bullwinkle short was later released in both 2D and 3D on the Blu-ray 3D edition of Mr. Peabody and Sherman. Kenny also voiced Bullwinkle in a Geico commercial that same year to promote the short. In the 2018 Amazon Video reboot, The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle, the character was voiced by Brad Norman. So, what about the creator of these interesting characters? How did he create something as satiric and excellent as Rocky and Bullwinkle? Keep watching to find out. The genius who made Rocky and Bullwinkle, Joseph Ward Cohen Jr., born on September the 20th, 1920, better known as J. Ward, was an American animator and producer, best known for creating The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle and Friends. He also brought to life a wide array of beloved characters, including Crusader Rabbit, Dudley Do-Right, Mr. Peabody, Hoppity Hooper, George of the Jungle, Tom Slick, and Super Chicken. Through his company, J. Ward Productions, he designed the iconic mascots for Cap'n Crunch, Quisp, and Quake cereals, producing memorable TV commercials for them. Ward even ventured outside animation with the non-animated series Fractured Flickers, which humorously redubbed silent films. Ward grew up in Berkeley, California. He attended Francis E. Willard Intermediate School under the name J. Ward. He earned his undergraduate degree at the University of California, Berkeley, and went on to receive an MBA from Harvard Business School in 1947. Interestingly, on the very first day he opened his real estate office at Ashby and Claremont in Berkeley, a runaway truck crashed into the building, pinning him. While recovering from the accident, Ward decided to pursue cartoon animation, though he continued running his real estate business, later relocating it to Domingo Avenue and then Tunnel Road. Even after moving to Los Angeles, the business remained in Berkeley. He also suffered an incident of incorrect medical treatment while hyperventilating on an airplane, which contributed to his developing agoraphobia later in life. Ward entered the emerging medium of television with the help of his childhood friend, animator Alex Anderson. Together, they brought the character Crusader Rabbit to NBC TV and pioneering TV distributor Jerry Fairbanks, producing a pilot called The Comic Strips of Television. The pilot featured Crusader Rabbit, Ham Hock Bones, a parody of Sherlock Holmes, and Dudley Do-Right, a bumbling Canadian Mountie. NBC and Fairbanks were only impressed by Crusader Rabbit. The animated series premiered in 1948 and ran until 1952, using a serialized mock melodrama format to follow Crusader and his dim-witted sidekick, Rags the Tiger. In both style and storytelling, it foreshadowed the series that would bring Ward lasting fame, Rocky and His Friends. Ward and Anderson later lost the rights to Crusader Rabbit in a legal battle with businessman Shul Bonsall, who had taken over the bankrupt Jerry Fairbanks Company's assets. As a running gag, many of Ward's cartoon characters had the middle initial J. This inspired cartoonist Matt Groening to give the middle initial J to many of his own characters as a tribute to Ward. Ward was no stranger to controversy, frequently clashing with networks and sponsors over content. One notable example was the Curward Derby, a bowler hat that made everyone stupid and Bullwinkle a genius. The hat's name was a spoonerism of Durward Kirby, the co-host of Candid Camera. When Kirby threatened to sue, Ward famously replied, "Please do, we need the publicity." Known for his eccentricity and flair for publicity, Ward once staged a bold stunt during a national crisis. He leased an island near the Canadian border in Minnesota, calling it Moosylvania after Bullwinkle's home. Ward and publicist Howard Brandy traveled across the country in a van, collecting signatures for a petition to make Moosylvania a state. They even went to Washington, D.C., attempting to meet President John F. Kennedy to advance their cause. Unfortunately, Ward and publicist Howard Brandy arrived at the White House on the very morning the Cuban Missile Crisis was breaking out, and were ordered at gunpoint to drive away. Ward married Ramona Billy Compton in 1943, and the couple had 3 children, Ron, Carrie, and Tiffany. He passed away from renal cancer in West Hollywood on October 12, 1989, and was laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park Cemetery in Glendale. The offices of J. Ward Productions were located across from the Chateau Marmont on the Sunset Strip. By 2007, the building was marked by a statue of Bullwinkle and Rocky at its entrance. In 2013, the statue was reportedly removed by DreamWorks Animation, which then owned the licensing rights to the J. Ward catalog. DreamWorks stated its intention to restore it, though its whereabouts were unclear as of May 2014. Speculation suggested the statue might be relocated to DreamWorks' headquarters. After J. Ward's death, Alexander Anderson Jr., who had originally developed the first concepts for Dudley Do-Right, Rocky, and Bullwinkle, discovered that the characters had been copyrighted solely in Ward's name. Anderson, who had never received public recognition for his early creative contributions, filed a lawsuit against Ward's heirs to reclaim proper credit. In either 1993 or 1996, sources differ, Anderson reached a financial settlement and secured a court order officially recognizing him as the creator of the first version of the characters of Rocky, Bullwinkle, and Dudley. On June 21, 2000, Ward was posthumously honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame at 7800 Hollywood Boulevard for his contributions to television. The recognition coincided with publicity for the live-action/animated film The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle. Ward's legacy also lived on through the Dudley Do-Right Emporium, a souvenir shop on Sunset Boulevard that sold merchandise based on his characters. The store, largely staffed by Ward and his family, remained open until July 2004. What do you think about the Rocky and Bullwinkle episode that was banned? Do you think the show would have lasted even longer if that string of events had not occurred? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you for joining us. Recount the episode that was banned on the Rocky and Bullwinkle show, the attempts at reviving the show, and the interesting life of J. Ward. the character's creator. We hope you found this video both entertaining and interesting. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the next video on your screen to explore more untold stories of people, cultures, and origins. See you there.